Hey there, it's Angela. You know that the podcast is on hiatus for this summer, but I like to pop in from time to time with special announcements and messages for you. And I have so much on my heart right now that I have to share. It's like 2 a.m. here, and I just got the inspiration to write and produce this. So here we are. Because here's the thing. It's a heavy time right now, right? There's civil unrest and turmoil and pain and loss and destruction, and all of this in the middle of a global pandemic. But still, I see so much beauty and hope. And I see an incredible opportunity for educators to create positive change. Let me explain where I'm coming from. Right now, as I see it, what's happening in our country is an uprising. In every sense of the word, we are witnessing a historic rebellion against injustice. And the events of the past week are something that we're not going to go back from. This is a time of reckoning. We're not going to go back to the way that we were. We've had so many new understandings and so many different events have transpired. It's changed us profoundly as a country in a way that I think is moving us exactly where we need to be. This is shaping who we are as Americans. I see an unprecedented number of white people who are deeply moved by racial injustice and who are standing in solidarity with Black people. The outpouring of love and concern and solidarity for Black people right now is like nothing I've ever seen. And I encourage you to stay focused on that love and the peaceful acts that we see that are inspiring to us. Don't get distracted by the folks who are out of order. The energy for us to persevere comes from all of the positivity that's emerging. Think big picture and long term. Keep your eye on the end goal of racial equality and racial healing. And to be clear, the healing comes from justice, not from kindness alone. It's not enough to just be nice to everyone. If it were, then we'd be in a different state right now. We have wrongs in our country that have never been righted, and that has to happen. We're seeing it happen right now. Dr. King taught us that true peace is not merely the absence of tension, it's the presence of justice. If what we want is lasting peace and unity and harmony, then we can never give up on working toward justice. So don't focus on the pain and the discomfort that we're experiencing now in order to get to where we want to be. Know that it's part of the process. It's going to pay off. Transformational change very rarely happens without resistance and struggle and sacrifice. But we have a unique opportunity right now. There's so much mobilization. There's so much awareness. There's so much energy and support for these issues throughout our country and even beyond as we see people continue to protest and march around the globe to support this. So don't lose hope. Don't allow yourself to sink into helplessness and despair. Instead, take action. Question norms. Disrupt systems. Shift the balance of power to create true peace. Use your voice for racial justice and push for positive change. There's something incredibly powerful, specific, and important that you have the power to do. And I'm going to share it with you now. You see, we all know that discrimination is wrong. We all know that murder is wrong. And when we get stuck in that space where we're just like, well, everyone already knows it's wrong. What are we supposed to do about it? That's where the helpless feelings come in. We start to feel like, well, I'm not killing anyone. I don't know anyone who would condone that. So what am I supposed to do to stop it? But we can't be that simplistic in our thinking. The harm of racism is not always as clear and overt as it was with George Floyd. And we can't only speak up about the blatantly terrible acts that everyone agrees on. White supremacy is insidious. As the saying goes, it's not like a shark in the water. It is the water. We're surrounded by it all the time. So as educators, some of our most important work can come from digging more deeply to uncover the discrimination that is embedded in our institutions and our policies. The inequities in our schools were created. It's by design. Broken systems are functioning exactly as they were intended. Over time, our schools have evolved to be more equitable, but that didn't happen on its own. It happened because people like you and me have fought to make them better. Teachers, parents, kids, community members have advocated for equality and helped make incredible progress toward ensuring that every child receives the same high-quality education and has their full identity recognized and valued. And that work isn't done. I'm going to share 2 things you can do to make a difference. One for educators who are just waking up to the importance of this work, and one for those who are ready for more. If you're at the very beginning of the journey, I encourage you to take this summer to read 2 books. And I'll recommend White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo and How to Be Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. I'll link to both of those in the show notes. Now, I'm not saying that these are the best books. I'm not saying they're perfect books to start with. I'm not saying that these are the 2 definitive beginner books or things that you should definitely read above all else. I just know that if you Google it, you'll get a zillion articles with a zillion different recommendations of fantastic reads. I just don't want you to be so overwhelmed that you never take action. So these 2 I have read personally and found them helpful. So I know that I can recommend these 2 to you, and I think that they would serve your purposes. So read White Fragility, Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism, and How to Be an Anti-Racist. Read those this summer. Reflect on how you will change your classroom practices in the fall. I'm also going to link to discussion guide questions that you can use to help you think through how this connects to your teaching practice. Now, these discussion guide questions were designed for teachers by Clear the Air, which was founded by the incredible Val Brown. I will put links to that in the show notes too. If you have any specific questions about these discussion guides or the book chats, feel free to ask me so that Val doesn't get overwhelmed with new folks who want to learn more. So if you've never taken any steps yet toward being an anti-racist educator, that could be a place to start. If you are ready to enact more change, here's what I encourage you to do. And this is where I think the power really starts to come in. Get together virtually or in person with a teacher friend or a colleague. And together, commit to uncovering and rooting out discriminatory practices in your classroom, in your school, in your district. Now, that sounds fancy and complicated and maybe more than what you feel like you're capable of taking on, but it doesn't have to be. In fact, there are already existing resources that you can use to help. It's called an Equity Audit, and I'll share a checklist where you can begin by going down that checklist and reflecting on what is and isn't in place. That'll make it super simple to identify some places where you can start creating positive change right away. You might choose a few key elements to examine for bias, such as dress codes, discipline and suspension policies, school-to-prison pipeline, response to student behavior, grading policies, classroom management, instructional approaches, or curriculum materials. Now, don't get overwhelmed by this. Remember that you're not responsible for trying to fix all the problems single-handedly. The goal is to be able to recognize and interrupt patterns of racism that are embedded in the way we do school. Remember when Jen Bennis was on the podcast back in episode 153? She taught us about the history of the teaching profession and why teachers being overworked and underpaid is actually a feature of how our schools function. It's not a bug. It's by design. And she taught us how to look for harmful patterns and interrupt them. Don't let racist or sexist or otherwise biased policies and procedures just continue without interruption. Call attention to them. Name them. Question them. So when you're uncovering the bias in your own classroom or school, you might start with just a single aspect, maybe just one unit of study, or maybe just the classroom environment, or maybe just suspension policies, and then tackle more over time. Work with your colleague to follow 3 steps. The first is researching and identifying those discriminatory policies. Your school or district may already have done an equity audit, so check first to see if one exists. That way you can look through what they've uncovered and find the weak points that need improvement. If there are any educators, particularly Black educators or other educators of color, who have already begun this work, follow their lead. Be careful not to ask them to do work for you, but it is important to defer to folks who have been speaking up about this already. You lending your voice to what they've been saying will be more powerful than trying to create a whole separate movement. So seek out the work of other teachers who have already been doing this and stand in solidarity with them. That's step one. Just identify the discriminatory practices in your classroom, school, or district. In step two, decide how to make adjustments to the way your classroom operates. So this is where your personal responsibility comes in. Think about how you're interacting with kids. Consider the rules that you make. Consider how you enforce school policies. And think about what you can personally do to create change. And then finally, in step three, create a plan for approaching school leadership with suggestions and solutions. See if you can identify a handful of things that need to be changed at the systemic level and offer up some best practices to your school leaders. Administrators need your support right now. They need solutions in this area, even if they're not asking for them. So research and identify discriminatory practices, decide how to make adjustments to the way your classroom operates, and then create a plan for approaching school leaders with suggestions and solutions. This is not simple or easy work, of course, but it's worth it. It's one way that you can make a powerful difference as a teacher committed to anti-racism. And it needs to be done now. Black folks and other people of color cannot wait for a more opportune or convenient time. And I think we have a unique opportunity right now because there's more widespread awareness and support for this kind of work than I can ever recall in my lifetime. Folks are paying attention. They care. White people are speaking out. And that means school and district leaders are going to be more concerned with equity measures than ever before. So if you're not sure what you can really do to make a difference right now, this is it. This is how to make an impact within your sphere of influence as a teacher. Remember, you don't have to fix everything all at once. Focus on recognizing and interrupting harmful patterns. And I'll tell you another reason why this moment in time is so ideal for rooting out racism. It's the effect of the pandemic on education. School policies and procedures this fall are going to be different than ever before. We can't uphold the status quo and do things how they've always been done, even if we wanted to. Think about how quickly our lives changed back in March and how substantially they've changed since then. We can leverage this opportunity to create bigger transformations in how we do school, and we can experience those transformations faster than would otherwise be possible without the pandemic. This is our moment, my friends. There's so much pain and heartache right now, but I believe that tremendous good will come from it because of folks like us who leverage the heightened public awareness to move toward racial equality and healing. We are not helpless. You and I have the power to reimagine schools and shape a world that is better for our students. Rise up and work for justice. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be worth it.